Meeting to order. And let everybody know that we are live streaming and recording this. If you want to see the recording, it will be available probably the beginning to middle of next week on the district's YouTube channel, which you can access from the district's website. So, Barb, could you take roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Present.
Director Walker,
Present.
Vice President Villanueva,
Here.
President Rice,
Here.
and Director Navarro Jr. will be coming.
Yeah, he's just going to be a little bit late. YVC started its first day of school today, so he's having to take care of work-related matters. Okay. We have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a student doing the pledge for us today. That's a question, not a statement.
Not a student, but a board member.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Oops, wrong hand, right? Okay. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Graciela. And Raymond was supposed to do the land acknowledgement. So let me pull that up and I'll read it.
Martha, I can do the September character word of the month as well.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
The September character word of the month is honest, defined as worthy of praise, reputable, respectable, and trait is responsibility and accountability. And in Spanish, honesto, digno de confianza, íntegro, respetable, y la característica responsabilidad y obligación personal.
Thank you, Graciela. The Yakima Land Acknowledgement. Today, the schools of the Yakima School District rest on the ancestral lands of the 14 confederated tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. The people of Yakima Nation inhabited more than 12 million acres across Adams, Benton, Chelan, Douglas, Franklin, Grant, Kittitas, Klickitat, and Yakima counties. Today, we honor those Native peoples who are tied to the land through history, legends, and culture. We acknowledge their descendants who live in the world today. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to live here since time immemorial. An acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way to show respect and a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' history and culture. It also honors the truth. As a school district, we will continue to build upon our relations with the Yakima Nation. Okay, and next we have a moment of silence to honor the memory of one of our former members of the Yakima School District family, Janice Case. Jan Case was born in Oklahoma to Johnny and Vera Robbins. Early in life, her family moved to Pasco, where she graduated from Pasco High School, excelling both as a student and musician. In 1963, Jan married her high school sweetheart, James Case. As newlyweds, they moved across the country to Virginia, where James completed his service in the Army, and Jan worked for the Navy. In 1967, Jan and James welcomed their daughter, Dana, and moved back to Washington State, where they welcomed their second daughter, Tracy, and sons, Ryan and Rob. As the children grew, Janice proved to be an accomplished seamstress, cook, and homemaker. She made her daughter's dresses, grew an extensive garden, canned vegetables and fruits, baked frequently, and cooked dinner from scratch nearly every night. With skill and pride, she decorated the family home built in 1971. Jan resumed her education and earned a bachelor's degree while working part-time and raising 4 children. She then spent her career with the Yakima School District, teaching at Eisenhower High School for many years and devoting herself to AP English courses. In addition, she coached varsity cheer and girls golf alongside her husband, who coached the boys golf team. She later returned to school to earn her master's degree and became an administrator, serving additional years as vice principal at multiple Yakima School District schools. Jan had a sharp mind and a strong personality befitting her curly red hair. She valued manners, toughness, and a big family dinner, forever grounded in the values her Southern Baptist parents imparted to her. Janice's love for great literature and crossword puzzles, love for her husband, children, and grandchildren, and love of her beautiful flowers and bountiful garden were evident to all who knew her. I first encountered Jan, I think she was a vice principal at Davis High School, and I had great respect for her, and we developed a pretty good relationship while my children were going through Davis. My sincere condolences to her family, and I'd like to ask that we now have a moment of silence in recognition of the passing of Jan Case. Thank you very much. Next, we have an attendance proclamation. I've asked Director Beckett to read that for us.
Thank you, President Rice. And as a former student of Jan Case, it would be lost if I didn't ask some questions. She was tough as nails and yet very fair. And I didn't find out until after I graduated, she was also quite funny. But she was a fabulous instructor at Eisenhower when I had the opportunity to be one of her students. The attendance proclamation that I have in front of me tonight, I just have a couple of quick questions. The language in this doesn't appear to come from the governor's office. I see that there was some instruction from OSPI. Is this from our board as a whole, or is this from OSPI?
I'm going to ask staff to respond to that.
It's from our staff, yes.
It's from staff, okay. I read through the proclamation. It's quite lengthy, and I'll be very happy to read it, as I have been assigned to do here tonight. Is it our practice? I should know this by now. It seems like these usually have a vote at the end to accept or reject. Is that correct, President Rice?
Typically, we just read it, and we don't necessarily vote on it, but if you'd like to take a vote on it, we certainly can, with the approval of the rest of the board members that are there, do that.
Well, I think without I think what I'd like to do, if I could propose, there are 13 different whereases, or the paragraphs that precede the actual proclamation. The proclamation, which begins at the "now therefore be it resolved," makes perfect sense to me. Prior to that, I have some questions about it. So I guess I could do two things. I could read the whole thing just simply as I've been assigned, or I could read the proclamation just from the therefore there be it resolved part moving forward. I notice it's Awareness Month for September, so there is a possibility we could come back to this, but I wanted to ask some questions because I feel like a lot of this doesn't take into account what some of the community is feeling. And so before I do it, which again, I'm happy to just simply read it as it is, if that's the board's directive, but I wanted to make my questions known and get those answered in the meantime. So President Rice, I'll follow your lead.
Well, we have had this document since Friday noonish, and I would have hoped that if there were any questions, those could have been posed to staff before this. We have the business meeting coming up next week. We could certainly read it then.
Well, if possible, may I just propose? I would like to, but I won't be here next week. So let me just read the entire proclamation as it is, and the board can do with it what they may, Madam President.
Okay, go ahead.
Whereas the COVID-19 pandemic and other crises have eroded positive conditions for learning and created an absenteeism crisis. Whereas chronic absence, missing 10% or more of school, alerts schools, community partners, and families that one or more positive conditions for learning are not in place. Whereas students are more likely to attend school when positive conditions for learning, physical and emotional health and safety, a sense of belonging, connection and support, academic challenge and engagement, and adults and peers with social emotional competency are in place. Whereas the impact of absenteeism and punitive approaches to school discipline contribute to the achievement gap that separates student living in low-income communities and many students of color from their peers who may have more resources to make up for lost learning time in the classroom. Whereas showing up for school is an opportunity for schools to build routines that can create a sense of safety and belonging, increase engagement, and develop trusting relationships with peers, teachers, and school staff that increase engagement and motivate them to participate in learning. Whereas reducing absenteeism requires taking a comprehensive approach that begins with prevention and early intervention and adopting trauma-informed approaches rather than responding with punitive action. Whereas improving attendance and reducing absenteeism takes schools, families, and community partners working together to identify and address factors contributing to students missing school, particularly a lack of digital access, mental and physical health services, and access to basic economic supports, including food and housing. Whereas partnering with students and families to monitor attendance, as well as understand and address barriers to attendance, requires building and sustaining caring relationships and regular communications in the home language spoken by families. Whereas research found, even before the pandemic, that families had high aspirations for their children, yet faced significant barriers in getting their children to school, or lacked the knowledge that showing up nearly every day to school was crucial to academic achievement. Whereas taking attendance daily in a consistent manner and for different types of learning opportunities, be it remote or in person, is essential to identifying when students begin to miss too much school. Whereas taking a positive problem-solving approach to reducing absenteeism requires expanding data to include reviewing chronic absence and attendance data for in-person and remote learning, availability of working contact information for families, connectivity, devices and internet, and positive relationships. Whereas promoting attendance requires noticing as soon as possible when students are starting to miss too much school in order to engage students and families, identify and offer needed support and early intervention resources. Whereas ensuring an equal opportunity to learn requires using data to detect high levels of absenteeism and missed opportunities to learn by school, grade, and student population. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Yakima School District stands with the nation in recognizing September as Attendance Awareness Month. We hereby commit to focusing on reducing absenteeism and addressing the factors that cause students to miss school, whether offered at a distance, in person, or a blend, in order to ensure all children an equitable opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. We recognize that we must work together to engage students and families and communicate that learning can and must continue, whether students participate in person, remotely, or through blended approaches. Specifically, we will make clear that improving student attendance, including taking daily attendance in a consistent manner and monitoring absenteeism, continues to be a top priority. Use an expanded set of data, including analyzing attendance and participating in in-person and remote learning, digital access, availability of working contact information, and relationships to school staff, to monitor outcomes for different populations of students, raise public awareness, establish goals, allocate resources, track progress, and assure accountability for an equal opportunity to learn. Engage students, families, educators, and the broader community, including civic and elected leaders, local businesses, clergy members, and nonprofit organizations, in working together to identify and remove barriers to getting to school and develop meaningful solutions that ensure all children and youth keep learning despite the challenges of COVID-19. Ensure access to learning by promoting universal access to internet and computer devices to all students and school staff. Use chronic absence data along with other indicators to identify where the instructional losses are occurring and invest additional resources in schools and school-related programs, including tutoring, expanded learning, community school strategies, and health services. Dated this 12th day of September 2022 by the Yakima School District Board of Directors.
Thank you, Ryan. I know that this is kind of a lengthy proclamation, but attendance is one of those areas that the board follows very closely, and making sure that the community is aware that we have this statement of our belief that attendance is important is equally important for us to continue our work in educating students within the Yakima School District. Although it's not necessarily the way that we normally treat proclamations, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve this proclamation, and then we'll have some discussion if there is any. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
I have a motion from Graciela. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Norm. Is there any discussion?
Just a comment in reaction. I agree that the attendance is exceedingly important. It's probably a number one reason for success is showing up. However, and I want to recognize someone put a lot of work into this, but I agree that I think it's much too long and too wordy. And maybe that's another discussion about the form our proclamations need to take. But I really do think that should have been looked at closer and condensed. And I apologize for not reading through it myself before this meeting, or I would have said so earlier. But I really think it needs to be, proclamations in my mind should be probably a page in the body of the proclamation and then the signature page, not a 3-page document. So just my personal opinion on that matter.
Thank you, Norm. Is there other discussion?
Martha, I have a point of clarification. Is there, maybe this question is for Bob, is there an issue of taking action on an item that wasn't set for action on the agenda? I don't know if that question made sense. Wait, made sense.
No, it's fine. I know that Director Beckett asked that as an option that it be considered by a vote of the board, and
Okay.
if the board's okay with that, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yes, I'm just wondering about, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering about accountability. How will the superintendent report to the board? There's quite a few things here that we said that we're going to be doing. Make clear, improving. I mean, let's see. How do we know we're taking attendance in a consistent manner and monitoring absenteeism? How do we know it's a top priority? I mean, you know what I mean? There's a lot there to measure and to report on. So I'm just wondering, I'd like to know how we're going to be going about to do that. Is it through the end statements? Or is it other reports that the board will be receiving? So again, there's just a lot of information there that could expand the amount of data that we're receiving in terms of reports.
Dr. Green, do you have a response?
Well, I could go through each of the bullet points. As far as monitoring, making clear that improving attendance, including daily attendance, is a top priority. It's called out in our strategic plan as the goal number 2. So that is a top priority that the community does know about. We do take attendance on a daily basis. We have policy for that, state requirements for that. So there's nothing really new in that first bullet point. Second bullet point, use of expanded data, including analyzing attendance and participation in person and remote learning. That goes along with the monitoring. I could read the rest of that: to monitor outcomes for different populations of students, raise public awareness, establish goals, allocate resources, track progress, which are part of a process that does happen in each of our buildings. So reporting out would be part of a attendance share out with the school board, if you so chose. Number 3, and I could go through the rest of these, or what I may be hearing from the board is we could just come back with a proclamation then and delete any of the indicators and make a simple statement, and then not worry about any of the measures in addition to what we already have in place, which I would fully support. Or I could go on with the other 3 bullet points. What would you prefer?
It seems like if it's in the strategic plan, I think that might be enough. Otherwise, we're going to get a lot more data.
So then I will once again then suggest that if we could just go ahead and bring this back for review next week.
So in order to do that, we will need to withdraw the current motion. Which would mean that Graciela would have to withdraw the motion, Norm would have to withdraw his second, and then we would proceed with a motion to table until next week.
Happy to do that. No, question for Ryan. I think you'd indicated some questions or maybe comments that you wanted to share, and maybe also that you would not be here next week. Do you want to ask questions now, or do you want to connect with superintendent offline to firm up those answers to your questions? Or
Thank you. I think 2 things come to mind, and unfortunately, I'll be traveling to Spokane next Tuesday evening, so I won't be able to be at the meeting. But I went through the whereases, and 5 of the 13 are very, obvious, make perfect sense. Obviously, I don't think anybody on our board would ever disagree that attendance is a critical component to any student success in their academic life. There are some some political aspects that get tossed in here because of COVID-19 that I don't think are necessarily appropriate. And more importantly, I think based on the conversations we've had over the last couple of weeks, there are 4 different times within this particular proclamation where opportunities are addressed or brought up. And as we know, I believe it was Director Walker pointed out that access and opportunity does not equal equity. And if that is the position of the board, then that should be taken into consideration in this particular proclamation. I certainly think it can be reworked and reworded into a manner that everybody would support with no trouble, because we do all believe that students have to be there in order to be engaged and successful. And I wish I could be there next Tuesday.
Okay, so I heard that Graciela is willing to withdraw her motion. You need to state it that way, though, Graciela.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay. Norm, do you withdraw your second?
I will withdraw the second so we can reconsider this next week with
Okay.
an
I would
improved version.
I would entertain a motion to table the attendance proclamation until next Tuesday's business meeting, where we will readdress it, and that will give staff some time to rework this a little bit.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Graciela, seconded by Ryan. Is there discussion?
Does not look like it, Martha.
Thank you. Okay, we do need a vote on a motion to table. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? It carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Next, we have under board reports, multilingual learning report to the board from Tally Garcia. Mr. Superintendent, do you or one of your staff want to lead us into this?
Yes, thank you, President Rice. I would ask Dr. Rodriguez to lead the introduction here.
Thank you, Board President Rice, members of the board. We are excited to be providing 2 teaching and learning updates today. The first will be multilingual learning update with a focus specifically on our dual language program from our multilingual learning director, Tally Garcia. And that will be immediately followed with an update on English language arts and Spanish language arts from our director of instruction, Erin Chaplin. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Testing. Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon, distinguished school board members and Superintendent Green and esteemed cabinet members. My name is Tally Garcia, and I'm the Director of Multilingual Education. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to let us provide you an update on the transformational work that has been going on in our schools, serving our multilingual students and families. First of all, I'd like to start off with the district strategic plan, goal number 4, which states students will become bilingual by graduation. As you are aware, this is one of our key initiatives spoken by our students, our community, and unanimously voted by the school board. And we have committed to this work through the year 2026. In order to measure our outcomes, we have 3 bullet points there. At least 75% of pre-K 5 schools will have access to a 2-way language program in 2019. We started at 0%, and now we have grown to 57%. Out of every 20, 50% of middle school students will participate in a world language course or cultural exchange program. In 2019, we started at 0%, and now we have grown to 20%. At least 10 out of every 20 graduating seniors, 50%, will attain the seal of biliteracy. In 2019, we started at 15%, and now we have grown to 21%. We have plans to continue building our language programs and increase the opportunities for our students to earn the seal of biliteracy, advancing our learners to be ready to compete in the global job market and being able to use their biliteracy skills. Our district offers a variety of language programs for multilingual students, and I'm proud to say we are committed to meeting the needs of all of our multilingual students, but most importantly, our school district is working extraordinarily in implementing dual language across our schools and advancing the program through the grade levels. Again, I like to emphasize many longitudinal studies have proven over and over again students who participate in the dual language program reach the highest levels of achievement, scoring higher on state and national tests, comparing with students who are attending any other program. Our district is also aligned with Washington State Superintendent Reichdel's vision to include dual language for all students in grades K through 8 by 2040. For us, we start at pre-K. Currently, Washington State has over 35,000 students spanning 42 school districts and state tribal education compact schools. Under Reichdel's plan, these numbers are increasing steadily. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Talik?
We have evolved our dual language program from one-way program in which multilingual learners are together to a two-way integrated program in which multilingual students and English speakers, heritage learners are together. For both programs, each has designated time for Spanish and English instruction throughout the day, eventually reaching 50% Spanish and 50% English by third grade. Since we have started dual language last year, there were 5 buildings, and now we have increased it to 8 buildings. And we went from 12 dual language teachers to now 35 dual language teachers this year. That is worth celebrating. This is indeed enhancing the educational system for our families we serve, supporting multilingualism and multiculturalism in our schools, hence increase high outcomes for our students. To accomplish this achievement, many departments had coordinated their efforts, including financial, HR, local colleges, and other supports contributed in the hiring process. I want to personally thank Dr. Rodriguez's leadership and hard work turning our initial challenges into solutions and her forward thinking in the hiring process. I also want to thank the principals being proactive in hiring our teachers as well. We will be adding 2 more schools for the next 3 years, where we will be growing our dual language programs in all of our elementary schools. In order for us to implement dual language on a larger scale, we have designed a dual language leadership committee that consists of 45 YSD members. We discuss a variety of topics that our leaders may have questions about or deciding the course of action through our consensus protocol. We learn from each other while engaging staff in the process to be able to listen to the variety of perspectives. This is an inclusive process that tends to be the most successful way for us because we are growing a commitment while building the program at the same time. With those 45 YSD Dual Language Leadership Committee members, they are also members of a subcommittee. We have a curriculum instruction and assessment, staff capacity building, and community outreach. They specifically work on building the program by planning ahead, have the opportunity to self-reflect on our progress, and develop next step on how to improve the program. We also have a core planning committee group that consists of 6 members, meeting regularly to review previous meetings to discuss our next action steps, and we design our next leadership meeting to address specific items that need attention. All our work is led by the guiding principles of dual language, which helps us gauge our implementation, but also it specifically calls out a higher level of planning is associated with a more successful program. Dual language professional learning. Through the development of a shared vision and implementing high quality teaching and learning for staff and students, we are able to create an opportunity for teachers and administrators to engage in a continuous learning, growing our instructional practices together. We understand how social, emotional, cultural aspects are equally important to linguistic and cognitive process as these experiences build into positive outcomes that is far beyond a typical classroom. On this slide, it shows a menu of collaborative training opportunities the Dual Language Academy offered in June. And we also offered Dual Language Jumpstart in August. We designed the classes to be staggered to support our first-year teachers and our second-year dual language teachers. So we'd be able to meet their instructional needs, for them to meet the instructional needs for their students. The pictures also show the collaborative work that we all participated in. As a department, we believe it is important to build teacher leaders who are in the classroom to be able to share their knowledge and experiences and to grow professionally. Dr. Green has shared several occasions. We have the experts right here in our district. Our multilingual team specifically designs professional learning trainings to be co-facilitated with classroom teachers who are interested in growing their leadership skills. This opportunity fosters a culture of leadership which sets a tone for a positive and empowering environment while highlighting the teacher's knowledge of expertise. In addition to the professional learning from the previous page, we also work closely with state and national leaders to help guide our work. And we also attend state and national conferences to continue to build our knowledge along with providing with insights and other experiences. And those are the list of other opportunities we are able to provide. I want to highlight on the left, the pictures are from our dual language parent nights we hosted in the spring. Parents are invited to engage with school staff and have an opportunity to learn about the program and ask questions. Imagine language and literacy. This is our second year in using Imagine Language and Literacy with our multilingual students. The program easily adapted to classroom routines and allowed for English language development teachers to use these resources as they are embedded in the program and tied directly to the WIDA standards and the intervention needs of the multilingual learner. We supported over 2,500 students who averaged 45 minutes a week on the program and passed about 45,000 lessons. At the end of the 2021-2022 school year, Yakima was awarded the Imagine Learning District of Excellence Award. This award was earned because of our commitment to effective implementation within Imagine Language and Literacy and math. At the beginning of the year, we established usage goals with our English language development teachers And based on the third-party research studies, Imagine Language and Literacy is most effective with 45 to 60 minutes of weekly usage. That was our baseline to help set our goals. Throughout the year, we provided educator support with intentional professional development trainings, coaching sessions with English language development teachers, and our Imagine Learning support team, and started to create systems where English language development teachers can share data from Imagine Language and Literacy with regular ed classroom teachers. As a result of our efforts, we were able to see an incredible increase of student growth. According to this benchmark data within the program, we saw an increase of 22% of kindergarten students that moved from testing below grade level on the beginning of the year to on or above grade level at the end of the year. For first grade, we saw an increase of 28%, and in second grade, we saw an increase of 34%. World languages, 7th through 12th grades. There are many reasons why learning languages for all students is important. One is to be globally competent and to provide school experiences that prepare all students for the 21st century. With language provided at the secondary level, students are required to have 2 credits in world languages or a personalized pathway in order to graduate. We're able to start enrolling students at the middle school level to begin accumulating those credits before they go into high school. Our district offers 5 different languages between the middle and high school, and we're looking forward to adopting a new curriculum for the French class this year. It's very exciting that students are utilizing this opportunity.
Dolly, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there any, are we going to be able to offer additional languages in future years? For instance, Chinese or German or something else?
That is the hope and opportunity that we could. We just will need to look at where we need to head for our next steps.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The seal of biliteracy. Students have opportunities to assess 2 languages to be able to attain an intermediate to middle proficiency level or higher. Competency-based credits can be earned by students. The 2014 legislature established the Washington State Seal of Biliteracy to recognize public high school graduates who attain a high level of proficiency in speaking, reading, and writing, and one of or more languages in addition to English. The Seal of Biliteracy is an award earned by graduating seniors who meet certain proficiency standards. Students will receive a notation on their high school diploma and transcript indicating they have earned the seal. They also must demonstrate proficiency in English language arts on the state assessment. I'd like to highlight this last year, we had 682 students who took the stamp test, and we had students earn over 2,000 credits. In comparison with the year 2018-19, we had 712 students who took the stamp test and earned over 1,300 credits, which means even though we had slightly less students, the students showed better results on the test and earned more credits. Learning more than one language is an asset to individuals, families, and our entire community. Teachers can share the benefits of bilingualism and encourage families to keep their language strong. Dr. Louise Cruz, our keynote speaker at the Convention Center, shared a simple yet powerful message that all students can learn at high levels. And being bilingual is a superpower, which also I'd like to point out it aligns to our motto as we are one, somos unos.
Thank you, Tali. That's a great presentation. Are there any questions from board members or need for clarification on any of the presentation?
I have a couple of questions, Martha.
Sure, go ahead.
On the earlier slides, I think maybe it was the first one that outlined the 2026 commitment around access to dual language programs. It said baseline was 0%, in 2022 measurement was 57%. Can you help me understand what, I guess in this case, what does access mean? So I think this is saying 57% of our PK to 5 schools have access to a dual language program. Does that mean if there's one class in the entire school, elementary school, that means access, or what is that?
We just grown dual language among schools. So we went from 0% to now we have 57%. So going from 0 schools to 8 schools.
So 8 schools, so about just over half of our schools have at least one dual language classroom. Is that what that means?
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay, great, thank you. And then really applaud the additional efforts to hire more dual language teachers. Can you help me understand how we assess their skill in whatever language they specialize in? How we assess the fluency of the individual teacher speaking the language?
So the assessment is something that we're looking into and reviewing with our HR department. And so that's be part of our hiring process to assess their language. But in the meantime, we're also looking at our TOSAs as well, as they do a lot of unit planning, and unit planning builds their language levels or their acquisition in Spanish as they plan together using the curriculum as well. So they're growing in that way.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, just a second, Martha.
So I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you asking if we have a formal process to ensure that the teachers are speaking the appropriate level of Spanish, or?
Yeah, well, how are we assessing whether the teacher who says they speak another language actually does?
We actually have a audio recording that they listen to, and then they translate that back to one of
Okay.
our Spanish-speaking members of HR, and then they have conversational Spanish to ensure that they are as bilingual as they claim they are.
Okay.
So it's not just, and I hate to say it this way, my version of Spanish, which is good in a restaurant, but not
I used to
everywhere
put
else.
bilingual on my resume, but I'm not anywhere near bilingual enough to, teach or, anything like that. So, okay.
So we have an internal process to make sure that anybody who is bilingual, whether it's teaching or whether they're applying for an
Okay.
office job or any other position that's bilingual required, goes through that process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I have one other question. Nope, I think that's it. No other questions, but I just want to thank you for your presentation and all the data points. And bilingual in schools, I think, is such an important thing to teach. And I really appreciate the images on your last slide. And I always think about when my parents were in school and they got in trouble for speaking Spanish. And when my dad first got here from Mexico, he was 13 and put in the special ed class because he didn't speak English. they assumed it was a special ed need there. And so I just appreciate how far public education has come, and particularly the focus that our district has on bilingual education, really celebrating that this is a cool thing. It's a superpower and something that we want to build upon, and certainly something that we heard loud and clear from the community as well during the strategic planning process. It came through very loudly that the community really wanted a bilingual program. So thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yes, I do have a question. So I'm just wondering how the process works for like kindergartens. We know that significant number of kindergarteners in the Yakima School District are behind 1, 2, or 3 years. So just wondering how the process works for them. Do they focus on their native language first? For how long? When do they transition to the dual language? So I'm curious about that.
So when we can even go back to pre-K if you'd like, but it's 100% in Spanish in pre-K, but as they transition to kindergarten, it's 80% of their day is in Spanish and 20% is in English. So right away we start to transition the students using both languages.
So do they have to show competency in either language, and how is that? I think Graciela was making reference to that. How do we determine when they transition, I guess, or they show competency?
So if you're looking at a formative assessment, we're showing competency in Spanish initially because the core content is in Spanish, and then eventually we're going to show competency in both languages as the languages increase more in their day, the English increases in their day.
Raymond, do you have other questions?
I do not, thank you.
Any other questions from board members or comments?
Just a comment and a couple questions. I'm thrilled to see the progress that we're making with dual language. I think that's exciting. I had one question about students that are learning American Sign Language. I understand we still have the deaf education program at Whitney. Is there been any effort or thought to the idea of also providing some dual language in American Sign Language so that other students at Whitney, it creates a world for those kids a little bit bigger if there are other students that are learning American Sign Language so they can communicate outside the enclosed classroom. So I was wondering if there's any effort in that area and if it continues through at Wilson and Eisenhower.
The effort that we put forth with American Sign Language is the seal of biliteracy, and then we're able to assess them in both their American Sign Language and the English part of it. So we haven't had an opportunity for a student to jump on that yet, but we've had teachers practice to provide that assessment. So they'll be able to get credits in order to pass that assessment.
Any other questions or comments?
There doesn't appear to be any other questions, Martha.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tally, for this great presentation. And I concur with my colleagues who have extended their appreciation to you for the informative nature of your presentation, and kudos to you and your program for continuing to push dual language in the classrooms and bringing in more dual language instructors. So thank you very much for your presentation today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation on English Spanish language arts to the report to the board by Erin Chaplin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here this afternoon and share with you a little bit about what we've been doing in English and Spanish language arts over the last year and what we're looking forward to this year. So you'll probably recognize this graphic. This features our teaching and learning strategies to achieve high quality teaching and learning. And we know that intentional focus over time through professional learning communities, induction, mentoring, and coaching, along with principal supervision, leads us to increased levels of core mastery and critical thinking. The literacy team, which is comprised of myself, along with Lori Dilbeck, who is an elementary English language arts specialist, and Erica Rodriguez, who is a Spanish language arts specialist, focus on content support to buildings in each of these 3 areas. One of our major focuses this year will be on early learning through grade 12 English language arts and Spanish language arts adoption. Specifically at elementary, we'll be looking at both English and Spanish language arts. And then at grades 6 through 12, we'll be looking at our English language arts for our curriculum review and adoption this year. So we're really excited about that. We've put out our applications and flyers, and so we're anxiously awaiting all of our applicants for this work. We know that increased levels of literacy for all students directly supports Yakima School District's Goal 3, equitable opportunity to achieve core mastery and critical thinking. This goal is achieved through a focus on our ELA standards and learning progressions over the course of a student's education in the Yakima School District. This infographic does a great job of representing what goes on as a student learns how to read, whether it's in English or in Spanish. We think of reading comprehension as our ultimate goal. And reading comprehension is essentially a product of 2 factors. One of those factors being word recognition, the other factor being language comprehension. Again, whether in English or Spanish, when we're starting to learn to read, we're focusing on our phonological awareness skills, making meaning of the letters and being able to blend those to have access to text and becoming more fluent, and then language comprehension through vocabulary, language concepts, and communication, whether that's through written communication or oral communication. Where, as Tally mentioned, we're in year 2 of our dual language implementation, which means we're increasing the manner in which we can support our multilingual learners, and then working only goal 1, equitable opportunity to achieve core mastery and critical thinking, but also working toward goal 4, bilingual biliterate by graduation. We know that a guaranteed and viable curriculum supports and ensures equitable access and outcomes for all students in the Yakima School District. One of the ways that we've focused on doing this is through a tool that we began using last school year. It's called the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory. The Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory is a tool that measures the degree to which a school-wide literacy framework is implemented. So last year, the literacy team and myself met with every single school's instructional leadership team, and we went through each component of the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory in the fall as a baseline for data, and then again in the spring, where we took a look at that same tool and the growth that was made in the building. So I'll be sharing what some of that growth looks like in this next slide. This is a fall to spring comparison of the average total score for both elementary and secondary. And one of the first things you'll probably notice is the difference between the elementary total score average and the secondary total score average. And there's a really good reason for that. Our elementary schools have had a long focus on professional learning communities, which is an essential component of the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory. Our secondary schools have had a really strong focus on ensuring that we have strong content experts for every single core subject area. And our current focus through our high quality teaching and learning strategies of professional learning communities will help ensure that we continue to have a focus on teams at both elementary and secondary for all of our students. My clicker's not, there we go. Sorry, let me go back. So the total score is based on 4 different subscales. And the research around the reading tiered fidelity inventory has found that a total score on each of the subscales of at least 80% and a total score overall of 80% lead to higher outcomes for students. So this slide shows what each of those subscales looks like at the elementary level.
And we're looking at student scores, like
So-
an average of student scores. That's what
Thank you
this
for
is.
asking the clarifying question. So this, the Reading TFI, the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory, is a tool that we use with instructional leadership teams comprised of teachers at the building. And it focuses on 4 different areas, teams being one. So it will have a series of items that identify the systems and the structures that need to be in place to have a strong team. It has a section that focuses on implementation, which identifies the instructional systems and structures that need to be in place to have strong tier 1 instruction throughout a building. There are components that are identified for resources, which would be our guaranteed and viable curriculum, as well as coaching and professional learning support. And then evaluation, which focuses in on how we use data and how we plan with that data in mind and are responding to that data with students in mind. So when we look at how the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory aligns to our current strategies, you'll see that professional learning communities and the teams, implementation, and evaluation subscales have tight alignment. So those professional learning team attributes will show up or do show up in the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory in those specific subscales. And the clicker, there we go. Induction, mentoring, and coaching show up in the team subscale as well, along with implementation. It actually shows up in resources as well as evaluation. So just imagine that yellow oval over resources in addition. And then our principal supervision is aligned to the Reading TFI in all 4 of those subscales. So through this work, we know that the Reading TFI can measure the impact of not only what's happening in the building systems to support literacy, but also what's happening with our high quality teaching and learning strategies. This is the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory broken down for our secondary schools. And one of the things that you'll notice when looking at that fall baseline, moving to the spring data, is there is a decrease in scores in the resources subscale. And one of the key reasons for that is at the beginning of the year, 2 of our middle schools had vacancies in their reading or their instructional facilitator positions. We weren't able to get those positions filled. And at that time, the instructional leadership teams were confident that they would be able to provide support within the building, even though they didn't have that position filled at that time. When we went back to the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory at the end of the year, the ILTs in those 2 buildings reflected and noted that there was an absence of support due to the position opening for the instructional facilitator. The instructional facilitator does a lot of coaching for teams, provides support for new teachers, and provides coaching support with a variety of instructional strategies. And luckily, through our staffing process that we went through in the spring, each building that had a vacancy now has a full-time instructional facilitator. So we'll see that over time, that resources subscale will, I'm sure, increase. Oh, any entry? One of the key differences between the secondary Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory and the elementary is at the secondary level, there's a strong focus in the implementation subscale on content literacy strategies. So that was one of the areas where the instructional leadership teams found that they wanted to focus their attention this year, was on developing and identifying content literacy strategies that could be used across content and across all grades in their building. Since we're talking about strong Tier 1 instruction, I wanted to bring to light where our new baseline is according to the Spring 2022 Modified English Language Arts Smarter Balanced Assessment. And as I'm sure all of you are aware from information from OSPI and in the newspapers, our scores statewide have reset after the 2 years of interruption to learning due to the global pandemic. So what we see here in Yakima is a mirroring of what has happened at the state level, where we have had a decrease in overall proficiency due to that interruption in learning. One interesting thing of note, and I thought it was rather serendipitous because it was mentioned in the Seattle Times this weekend, was the dip at grade 6 that we've seen statewide. So what you see on this graph between grade 5 and grade 7 is seen statewide as well. And there's several hypotheses about this, one being a transition year, especially after 2 years of interrupted learning and coming back full time. And imagine the last time you were in school was as a 3rd grader full time, and now you're coming back to a middle school where things are much, much different. So that is one hypothesis as to why we might have a dip there. The state, OSPI, is also looking into the 6th grade Smarter Balanced Assessment to see if there were any anomalies in the types of questions that were asked that may need to be weeded out in future versions of the 6th grade assessment. So with our TFI, our Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory, one of the things that ILTs were able to do based on the data that was gathered from that was identify clear action steps that will strengthen Tier 1 instruction. Because collectively, we expect high levels of learning for all of our students, meaning that we will be at grade level or higher. And these action steps that the ILTs identified are then built into their school improvement plan. The research done with the Reading Tiered Fidelity Inventory shows a direct correlation between strong Tier 1 instruction and a student's reading and language proficiency levels and outcome-based measures such as the Smarter Balanced Assessment. The 2021-2022 school year was the first year of implementation for State Senate Bill 6162, which is known as the K-2 Early Screening of Literacy, or otherwise known as the Dyslexia Law. The Dyslexia Law does a lot of wonderful things for our state, one of which is that it provides us a common working definition of dyslexia across the state. Another thing that it sets in motion is using tiered systems of support as a prevention model. So we're not reacting to students once gaps emerge, but we're focusing on a prevention model where we're looking to ensure that students are staying on track with their literacy learning as they go. So each of the bullets that I'll present here on this slide are a part of the dyslexia law legislation. As the name suggests in the law, it involves the early screening of literacy and progress monitoring. So last year, 2021-22, Yakima adopted a new early literacy screener called DIBELS 8. DIBELS stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. And we'll talk about the Spanish screener in just a moment. One of the great things about this new screener is it comes with a new platform. So the assessment is given with the tester using a laptop, which means as soon as the tester screens a student, the scores enter our system automatically, and the teacher has immediate access to that data. The screener is also several minutes shorter per student, so the students are back in class with their teacher on a much faster rate than they had previously. Early literacy screeners are great at identifying student strengths as well as where we can focus their support. And last year, we were able to use the new tool to identify not only those strengths, but where we could provide support for students. And we found that in every single grade at K-5, we had positive growth across all of our schools. Evidence-based practices is another area of focus in the K-2 early screening of literacy or dyslexia law. And an evidence-based practice is defined as something that, or materials or instructional methods that have been tested and found to be effective with large groups of diverse student populations. So much of our support to teams, to teachers, to instructional facilitators and principals were focused on evidence-based practices. I'm having to click multiple times here, sorry. And again, as I mentioned, the dyslexia law focuses on a prevention model. So the support to students is immediate, and we monitor progress all along the way. One of the additional benefits with this early literacy screener that we're using, along with the timely data that we have on our students, so we know how to provide supports, engage them in their own goal setting, is a communication and collaboration tool that's available called the Home Connect Report. The Home Connect Report is available in both Spanish and English. It provides a family-friendly definition of each of the early literacy skills and where students are in relation to those skills at their grade level, along with family-friendly activities that can be implemented whether at home, in the car, safely in the car, and even at the grocery store. Last year was an exciting year for job-embedded professional learning for our teachers at the K-5 level. We had 151 teachers that were involved in an online professional learning opportunity, blended learning opportunity called LETTERS. LETTERS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. Out of those 151 teachers, 119 are continuing their journey with the second part of LETTERS this year, and another 101 have joined, starting their journey this year with LETTERS as well. The literacy team, Lori and Erica and myself, are available and provide support for buildings, not only modeling lessons, providing coaching support, co-planning with teachers, looking at data with teachers, identifying what supports they need to meet the needs of their students. As I mentioned earlier, we have also a new screener for Spanish language arts. Last year, we were proud to be a part of a research and development study that was developing a native Spanish screener. That Spanish screener has now gone through reliability and validity measures and is now officially our K-5 Spanish language arts screener. It's called Lectura. This is an example of one of the sub-skills in Lectura called, and you'll have to excuse my pronunciation, ortografía, or spelling. And it's not the spelling that you think of when you think back on your own elementary career where you had a list and you practiced it and hoped you passed it on Friday. This is a measure of encoding. Encoding is a student's ability to be able to hear a sound and be able to correctly identify what letter represents that sound in a word. And it is highly predictive of future reading proficiency. So this is just one of the measures that is included in the Lectura screener. Our teachers were really excited to know that this screener was developed with having our students be a part of that research and development study, knowing that it was developed specifically for native Spanish speakers. And Tally mentioned earlier how we'll be looking at growth over time. So our students in our dual language model will be using this screener to gauge their progress over time, starting in kindergarten and moving up through the grades. As a part of our multi-tiered systems of support, the literacy team also provides support at secondary using the following evidence-based practices. Secondary, we also screen all of our grade 6 through grade 12 students using a tool called the reading inventory. The reading inventory is a way to measure a student's vocabulary and reading comprehension ability. It helps teachers identify how to scaffold instruction to meet the needs of their students and how to provide additional supports. And with the reading inventory last year, we saw increased numbers in both the advanced and the proficient levels, and decreased numbers of students in the basic and below levels. I mentioned earlier that the secondary instructional leadership teams found that an area they wanted to focus on based on that reading tiered fidelity inventory was content literacy. So this is an area where we provided a lot of support last year, and the support was primarily a team focus. And again, content literacy strategies focus on engaging students to think about, read about, talk about, and write about content. So this was a perfect focus for our content teams and then teams across the building. Read 180 is a class that students who may be farther from grade level in reading are eligible for. Out of our Read 180 classes last year, we saw increased levels of learning across all of our Read 180 classes. An example of that, mid-year, we had over half of our Read 180 students meeting their end of the year goals. So this class, Read 180, is designed to accelerate student learning in the area of reading and writing specifically, and it's geared specifically for middle and high school students. Our job embedded professional learning ties back up to that previous bullet on evidence-based practices, focusing on our content literacy strategies. And again, the primary mode was through teams. Many of our science teams, social studies teams, and English language arts teams met to identify writing strategies that they could use to help students engage with their reading and become more critical in their thinking. And that takes us to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Erin. Any questions from board members or comments for Erin?
Has the new K2 early screening of literacy, has that replaced or eliminated the WLPT? The Washington, do we still use that? We don't use that tool anymore, do we?
No.
Thank goodness. Okay. So I was glad to hear that. Oh, the other question is, do we have enough, is the DIBEL still administered by volunteers that come in?
So great question. Our DIBELs or our screening teams are internal teams now.
Okay.
So we use our instructional facilitator, our reading interventionist, academic specialists, and trained paraeducators for our internal assessment team. Before each of our screening windows, we do a calibration to ensure that our scores are accurate and in alignment with one another.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on, I guess, looking at, I don't know, slide 5, the difference in elementary and secondary scores around the tiered fidelity inventory. Is fall 21 the first time we used this system? And so that's really kind of the beginning, the baseline.
Yes.
Okay. What kinds of strategies? So it looks like certainly for both elementary and secondary, there's opportunity to get to 100%, I think is the goal, right?
Correct.
What strategies are we using particularly for secondary to kind of help that continue to increase?
So if we think about those 4 subscales, teams, our professional learning communities focus in the district is going to strengthen that immensely. Implementation, so that's the section of the reading tiered fidelity inventory that focuses on instruction. Through our PLCs, we'll also be focusing on that implementation section, so that area is strengthened as well. Resources, our current coaching in the building with our instructional facilitators, coaching teams, our induction, mentoring, and coaching mentors will be providing coaching support, and we have our content coaching that will help with that as well. This year with our PK through 12 ELA, SLA adoption, we'll be looking at and reviewing new curriculum for both elementary and secondary. So we'll be looking at materials that are more closely aligned to what we know are best practices at the elementary and secondary level. Evaluation, PLCs, and it sounds like PLCs is a cure for everything, but it kind of is. So the PLCs will really focus in on that evaluation subscale as well, because teams will be asking, what is it we want? Specifically to strengthen our tier 1 core instruction, and that will all show up in our reading tiered fidelity inventory.
And are there targets for each year, for each school building, either set by the individual school or by district offices? So again, focusing on secondary, a goal for Davis High School to get to whatever percentages it needs to be for that next year to show progress in attaining those appropriate tiers.
So the recommendation in using the tool is to focus on your lowest scoring subscale. And so the building's ILT, instructional leadership team, took a look at where they had the lowest scoring items, and then from there identified which specific items needed their greatest focus, and then developed their action steps immediately based on that.
And is that something linking back to the school improvement plans that we approved not too long ago, and I think maybe we'll see again in the fall? Is that kind of information, would that kind of information be outlined in those school improvement plans?
Definitely.
Okay.
And we actually see the reading tiered fidelity inventory as another piece of data that helps inform that school improvement plan itself.
Okay.
So it's another great piece of data. And the way that the reading tiered fidelity inventory is crafted, it really lists specific action steps. So it's really easy for instructional leadership teams to take that information and make it actionable and embed that within their school improvement plan.
Okay. No other questions, but thank you so much for your presentation and all the detail that you provide. I really appreciate having the data points over time. It's really helpful to see how progress is being made. So I'm glad that you include that. So thank you so much for your time. This is very detailed. I'm sure that was a lot of time and effort that you put into that. So
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Graciela. Are there any other questions or comments from board members?
Does not appear to be any other questions, Martha.
Okay, thank you. Erin, thanks so much for this presentation. We are much more well-informed about all things reading and all things literacy, because we continue to hear from you about the process that the district is going through for improving the literacy of our students. Thank you so much for your time today and for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have...
Excuse me, Martha.
Go ahead.
I have a request. Can we turn on the heater in this this room, or at least turn down the AC? It's getting kind of cool in here for me. So thank you.
I'm sure there's somebody there that knows how the thermostat works. Okay, next we have items of board interest. Are there any members of the board who have anything that they'd like to share with the rest of us?
President Rice, I guess I just have one question I might throw out at this time,
Go
if I
ahead.
may. I saw on Facebook today, thank you, Kirsten, for the call for community members to join the Capital Facility Advisory Committee. Just curious, how many roughly are we shy? Should the board be talking to our colleagues and cohorts and encouraging people to apply? How far off are we? I know it would look like we were like a goal of 40. Is that right?
We have submitted, went out again today, right? Our second petition for the 18 at-large positions and the 22 appointees. We're waiting just to finalize the final appointees positions, so that won't be an issue for those 22. And then I believe we were halfway there for the at-large positions through our first solicitation of volunteers. And so now that school's back in session and they see buses running, their minds will be, oh yeah, school's in. And we anticipate, and we're going to also run a platform in the local newspaper, so those who may not have students in school but have access or get their news through the news will be able to access that way as well. So we will be closing the survey and the requests next Friday, and then make an announcement next Monday.
Dr. Darling, when you say next Friday, do you mean Friday of this week or Friday of next week?
The 23rd.
Okay, thank you. Any other items of board interest from board members? Okay, next we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Green.
Thank you, President Rice. My update is pretty short this evening. I'll start by sharing that I was able to tour the entire district today and check out all of the wonderful changes and additions, updates that have been made by our maintenance, grounds, custodial departments. If you have not had the chance to see some of the facilities and the updates, that is something that I would really enjoy taking individual board members or groups of two around to see the approach that we've taken in our operations department, maintenance, grounds, custodial, to make sure that our facilities are improving across our system. So that was a tour that included not only buildings where we have students, but other buildings as well. And certainly during a one-day span, I was not able to get to every building, but enough to see the improvements that have been made and to be able to speak to those with our community. So a big thank you to our Assistant Superintendent of HR and his team in making sure that our facilities are top tier as well as they can be at this point. And we're excited about the opportunity that we will have in the future to share those more fully in a campaign with our community. Another update that I'd like to share is the Centegix installation. We do have a goal, of course, as a district to have our students feel empowered in safe and caring environments. Strategic plan goal number 2, dictating another part of what we do as a system. And in alignment with that, we have installation teams that are going out to our buildings. And I was able to, in my tour today, see several lights that were around the facility that have been installed. I can think of seeing one at Robertson right now and visualize where they were in the buildings. We have September 12th and 13th. We are placing the systems in Davis and Eisenhower. The 14th and 15th will be at Stanton and YV Tech. And then the 16th will be installation at the Innovation Center, Health Services, Central Services, across the street, as well as the Family Center. Actually, we will have notification devices as well at Coomer Field, the PDC and Resource Center, Tech Center, and Transportation. And a reminder that this crisis alert system empowers our staff to respond or request to immediate assistance for campus support in case of any incident. So it's it's a really a safety factor in being able to respond and have first responders go to the right location as soon as possible, but also to look out for staff in any type of situation in our campus at any time of the day. So I can tell you that some of the forgotten individuals that work in our system are those in custodial services, and they often work very late hours into the evening, locking up our buildings at 11 o'clock or later in some cases. And to know that they will have this device that they can click and have a connection in case of an incident, if that were to happen, either life-threatening health issue or something happening on site, is another way that we're continuing to look out for the needs of our staff, but also, of course, how that could play out during the day regarding incidents that could happen to the extreme to health issues as well. So we're excited about the product and being able to roll that out. I would look to my colleague to see if she has any follow-up comments or I've missed anything on the update that you would like to share. And if not, I'll proceed.
I just to answer probably the question, we look to have installation finished on September 19th. We started our installation on August 29th. And so everything seems to be going as planned, with a variety of training levels will be conducted after that for all staff in the district.
Thank you. And the last item that I would share with the board is something that was neglected to be shared at the very beginning, and that is when we do have our presentations, the two that were given today, those documents are now translated into Spanish. So when we have our interpreter working off of those PowerPoints as well to make it much easier to share that information and accessible to our community. And with that, I'll pass it back to President Rice, unless you have any follow-up questions.
Any questions or comments for the superintendent? I don't hear any. Okay, thank you, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
Next, we have our first opportunity for comments from the public on agenda items. Barb, do we have anyone signed up?
Barb is shaking her head
We do
no.
not.
Okay, thank you. Then we will proceed. Next is an approval item. We are asked to approve to pay ESD 105 for elementary summer programming for 2022 in the amount of $885,094.59. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Board President Rice, members of the board. I am here to request approval to make payment on the bill that we have received from ESD 105. This is a project that was an extension of an earlier contract we had entered into with ESD 105 for after-school programming and some minimal summer programming. We opted to collaborate with ESD 105 on an extended version of that summer programming, which resulted in increased staffing costs, material costs, etc. So this is the final total expense for the summer programming beyond the original contract that paid for after school and the initial plan for summer programming that we are seeking to complete. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Are there any questions from board members?
How many students did we have actually participate in that program?
I would be happy to get those statistics for you, Director Walker.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from board? Any other questions? Okay, the board is being asked what? I'm sorry, I thought I cut someone off. The board is being asked to grant approval to pay ESD 105 for completion of the 2022 elementary school program in the amount of $885,094.59. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Graciela. Is there any discussion?
It doesn't appear to be any questions or discussion, Martha.
Thank you. Since we are not all in the room, I'm going to ask Barb to do a roll call, please.
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Walker,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva,
Aye.
President Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. We've reached the second opportunity for comments from the public. This would be for any item other than agenda items.
There's nobody signed up.
Thank you. Next, we have the second reading of the 1400 series of operational procedures and policies. Bob, no reporting.
Do you want me to go ahead, Superintendent?
Yes, please. I can introduce you if you'd like.
That's
I'm
right.
sorry. So I'd like to share with the board. I don't know if you've heard our legal counsel, but we're excited to hear from him this evening. And I'll turn it directly over to Bob No.
Thank you. Good evening. You will recall that the 1400 series of the operating procedures have been modified to basically match what WSDA is suggesting that we make changes to comply with what they've suggested. So part of it for 1400, there's pretty significant changes, but all of it is really related to conducting business when there's a situation similar to what we were faced with when the governor's emergency proclamation went into place and other restrictions to how we could operate were in place. You might all remember that during the course of the COVID situation, we were almost on a weekly basis reevaluating how we could actually conduct our business and conduct our meetings. So this covers all of that and allows us the flexibility in the future so that we don't have to, I don't know, it was a huge dance. People probably remember the dance we engaged in trying to get our meetings and business completed. So those are the changes in 1400. I would entertain any questions on 1400. The other, I guess, point I need to point out is regular meetings, section 1. That was changed at the request of this board to have our meetings start at 4 o'clock on Monday. And that is it for 1400. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Go ahead.
So on 14, let me see what page that is. 1400 page 3 says that members of the board may appear at a remote meeting telephonically or so forth. So does that imply or mean that board members can choose to join the meeting online without any emergency? Or I'm just trying to clarify what that means there.
Yeah, actually, the way the law has allowed it for it is that during emergencies or special meetings, it could be remote. But if we've been engaging in remote access type of meetings up through the pandemic, we can continue to permit that as well. And that's what the OP provides for. You know, there's a preference for in-person availability for board members, but in situations where it's necessary, they can come in remotely.
So it doesn't have to be related to an emergency, right? It could be a personal preference or a situation. I guess I'm just trying to
right. If we were engaging in it and engaging in that practice during the proclamation from the governor, then we could continue that into the future if it was the board's desire. So that's the way it reads. It's optional. The board may curtail that in the future. I don't know, but right now it's available under this policy.
To clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think what you're referring to on page 3, where it says members of the board may appear at a remote meeting telephonically or by other electronic means that allows for real-time remote communication, that's under the subsection of emergency meetings. Are you referring to emergency meetings or regular meetings?
I don't know if there's another section that refers to that as well. So I wanted to clarify there. It's for emergencies only, or I guess that's my my main point is the remote attendance for emergencies, or is that an option that board members have for regular meetings and not during an emergency? Because I believe I saw another not a paragraph, but a sentence alluding to that, and I just can't find it.
You're correct. It's unfortunately, this is a really long policy, but there is a section in here that talks about if you engaged in the practice during the pandemic restrictions, then you could allow for that. Right? It's not a recommended practice. I mean, it's something that's available if the board desires. I'll look for the section.
Is that an opportunity for us to maybe clarify that a remote option is available for any meeting of the board, since that has been our practice?
I think it may be already clarified within the OP. I'm just needing to find it because it is lengthy.
Well, there was a section on page 1 in, I guess it's paragraph 5, where it states that because the district held some of its regular meetings remotely prior to March 1st, the district may continue to hold regular meetings remotely, even in the absence of a declared emergency, et cetera, et cetera. I wasn't here prior to then, so I don't know how many of our regular meetings were held prior to March 1st remotely of 2020. And I don't know if that's WSDA guidance or if that is part of state law. If that's an RCW, then that changes everything, of course. We're in a unique situation here where, of course, we want to allow for people to communicate telephonically or remotely. President Rice is a perfect example. The idea, though, of course, is that if we set a standard as a board for down the road, what's to stop somebody from getting elected and never actually showing up in person and always being remotely phoning in. The retreat session we just held the other night spoke specifically about the tone of the board is, of course, enhanced when we're all able to see each other and hear each other and understand body language and tone of voice and everything else. So I guess that would be my question. I think there should be some sort of a policy in place on that. Whether that's above or beyond WSDA guidance is up to our board, but just certainly something I think should be in place.
If I may respond to that, that is where the language is. Director Beckett did find it's on the first page, 4 paragraphs down. That is provided by RCW. That's why that's in there. I think the board at a future date, if they felt as if this was no longer necessary or it was becoming too much of a commonplace occurrence, the board could modify its policy. But right now, this is permissible by the RCW.
Thank you, and that's what I was wanting to the clarification on is that I do have the option of attending remotely. So thank you.
So is that maybe an opportunity for us to clarify around it's the preference of the board that we meet in person, but on occasion as needed, a virtual option is available, and maybe that's sufficient for Director Beckett's point. I think there is a lot of value in meeting in person and being able to see board members and things like that. So but it makes sense for us to clarify that the preference is folks meet in person, unless there's an occasional need, to be approved by the board or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. The board already approves or disapproves absences by board members, so it would be similar if a board member needed to appear remotely. There would be a motion to allow that board member to appear remotely, and maybe down the road there could be some criteria that the board would want to employ on when that would be used. But right now, the way the law reads is if you've been doing it since prior to March 2020, you could continue to do it. So,
And just to clarify, since I wasn't here, did this board allow people to participate remotely prior to March 1st of 2020?
I think so. I remember calling in from Texas once, forever ago. I don't recall, immediately before, that was before March 2020. So it
Part of-
happened times.
There have been times when board members have been, because of circumstances, had to connect remotely. Back in the day, it was difficult to do that because we didn't have the technology in place that we do now to do that. But we as an entire board were meeting when remotely. I think prior to March 2020, the years have kind of melted together, but I know that in the past we have allowed for that. Any other comments or questions?
Would it be helpful to, again, clarify in the policy that this board did meet remotely prior to that date? That way it's just clear that this is a practice we have, therefore we can continue this.
yeah, actually, that's what the policy says right now. Right.
Anything else?
There does not appear to be any other comments, Martha.
Okay, thank you, Graciela. Given that, this is second reading. And so I would entertain a motion for approval to the adjustments to the 1400 series. That would be
So,
operational procedure 1400, 1410, and 1420.
so moved.
Did you guys want discussion on 1410 and 1420? That was only 1400. I mean, if you're okay with the other two, then that's fine as well.
Oh, I'll withdraw the motion in that case, but my assumption was we're improving the whole series. Do we need to go through the other sections first?
I'll leave it to the board. If you want to talk about 1410 and 1420, we can. Otherwise, if you're okay with it, we can just move forward with adopting.
Are there questions on 1410?
There does not appear to be any questions, Martha.
Thank you. Any questions on
We got
14?
one. Hold on, we got one.
I
Okay.
guess my only question is just, especially 1410 was regarding to executive closed sessions. Were there any changes, Mr. No, that you thought were of note as far as previous to this that the board should be aware of or not?
Yeah, 1410 is the same as it has always been regarding executive sessions. The only section that was added is the first one. And that was because of a law change that allows us to go into executive session to talk about security breaches for data. If there's a data security breach, we can go and talk about it in executive session. It wasn't specifically permitted before. You might know that the executive section, what's permitted in executive session is very narrow. So unless it's specifically called out, you can't really talk about things in executive session. And this is one of them they thought needed to be called out. That's it.
Any other questions or comments on 1410?
There does not appear to be any other questions on 1410.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on 1420?
There does not appear to be any questions or comments on 1420.
Thank you, Graciela. So I would entertain a motion for approval of the updates to the 1400 series of the operational procedures and policies, consisting of 1400, 1410, and 1420.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Norm, seconded by Ryan. Is there any discussion?
There does
Barb?
not appear to be any discussion.
Thank you. Barb, could you call the roll, please?
Director Beckett,
Aye.
Director Walker,
Aye.
Director Navarro Jr.,
Aye.
Vice President Villanueva,
Yes.
President Rice.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. We've reached the end of our regular agenda. Mr. Superintendent, do we have a need for executive or closed session?
We do not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the order? I want to thank
There
you
does
all.
not appear to be anything else for the good of the order.
Thank you all for accommodating me. My ride is out of town, so it would be difficult for me to get there today. So I appreciate you accommodating me virtually. And I have one laptop that has no microphone and the other one that appears to have no camera now. So it was a challenge to get through even virtually today. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for the discussion. And our next meeting is next Tuesday night, the business meeting starting at 7 o'clock in the administration building conference rooms. Have a great week, and we will see you then. We are adjourned.